This week's topic is about minimalism or voluntary simplicity. Now, there's a modern movement called minimalism, and it's great. It's about owning fewer and fewer things. It was started by a couple of guys named Joshua and Ryan. I don't know if they really started the term or the movement, but they have a website and other things about minimalism, and they're called the Minimalists. I first kind of learned about this sort of topic in the 90s, and back then it was called Voluntary Simplicity. I started reading some books from Elaine St James. She had books called Simplify Your Life, Inner Simplicity, Living the Simple Life. It inspired me to write a little booklet of my own called Living the Creative Life. You won't find it, it doesn't have an ISBN number, you won't find it anywhere. It's just a small booklet I wrote. But it was a nice book to write and do a talk about at one seminar. And I learned a lot from doing it. Now, are there any differences between minimalism and voluntary simplicity? Well, there's some similarities. Some people would say they're the same thing. When I do interviews on this topic, I ask, what would you consider yourself? A minimalist? Are you, a voluntary simplicist? What would you describe yourself as? And I guess here's where I am in that camp. So minimalism is great. It's such a great concept to I want to own 100 items and just simplify my life, which is a really good goal. But I find that I have other goals in my life that create a different reality for me. And growing up in the 60s and 70s and then getting to the excess of the 1980s, then coming into the 90s and reading about voluntary simplicity, that really inspired me because it was no longer about living with excess, trying to work and buy as many things as you can. It was living, in a country, at a state of wealth, but, being able to say to yourself, hey, I want to simplify a little bit. I don't want all that thing, that will collect dust and create kind of a brain fog for me. I want to live a simpler type of life. And for me, that simpler type of life includes doing things like trying to grow my own food, cooking my own food, sewing some of my own clothes, and filmmaking. And so as I've been working towards simplicity, I've actually added a few more things in my life. People used to come into my apartment and say, oh, have you just moved in? Because there would be nothing in there. But now that, I really want to take care of myself and take care of the earth, I've learned we have to do things more locally. That means either buying from local crafters or learning to do things more yourself. And with that came tools. And so I needed the tools to do these. So doing more gardening, I needed some garden tools. And filmmaking, I need a little more filmmaking equipment. Sewing, I needed to get some sewing machines. Didn't have any for a long time. And cooking, I had very few cooking items at home, which made, things difficult sometimes. And wanting to stay healthy and make my own food, I've ended up buying a few cooking utensils and So I actually have 2 pots that I can cook with on the stove right now, which is great. And so that's kind of where I am with that right now. I still, because of following the voluntary simplicity movement early on, that's still really where my heart lies. But to do it with a purpose, and to still be able to do the things you love, put it in context. Are you doing really what you want to do? And if you're like me and you want to be more of a homebody and do more things at home, then things and tools to do those with is really nice. You can also use a sharing library, a tool library. That works too, but running down to the TV studio every time you needed a camera was, a little bit time consuming. And time has to do with simplicity also. I like to go by bus, and so, I don't like to drive. And so going down to pick up a camera or going to a tool library is going to be, kind of time consuming for me. And so I think I've narrowed it down to just the things that I need to have at home, to do the things that I really want to do. And that's really what makes life